Your airside at Naiya, how is it like right now?
When I entered, it's like, what happened here?
Traveling in the middle of a pandemic is probably one of the last things on our mind. Thinking about the procedures, the protocols, processes, making that effort to do cross-border travel makes you ask, is it worth it? Today, I'll be speaking with four of my friends who will be sharing their experiences traveling overseas.
I traveled from Manila to Taipei.
I recently traveled from Singapore back home to the Philippines.
During the pandemic, I've traveled multiple times from Germany into Singapore.
I traveled just a couple of months ago from Chennai to Singapore.
So how was it like at Changi Airport?
It was really empty and everything was closed, and I did not know if it was because of COVID or it was because my flight was at 2 a.m. So yes, it was deserted.
Your airside at Naiya, how is it like right now?
When I entered, it's like, what happened here? It's so quiet, and then you don't even have to queue up. You go there, you find your check-in counter.
Did you notice a lot of protocols in place? Was it clean? Did you see people literally like cleaning every corner?
I was thinking that they'd be in their bunny suits, right? But not really. There, in the counter, there's like this acrylic divider that's there.
Actually, I saw everyone in PPEs in the arrival when I was already inside. But when I was departing, everything was like any establishment in Singapore. There's the safe entry. Of course, you have to check in that you have, arrived at Changi Terminal 1. And then you go inside, you look for your check-in counter. Everybody is in masks and face shields.
In this pandemic, we've seen less and less people at airports. How about on the flights themselves?
But for my flight, there was maybe 40, 50 people.
The flight, if I'm not mistaken, I think it had just 15 to 20, including me, like passengers in total.
So there's probably less than 50% occupancy in the plane.
There were a couple of announcements made for our flight, and then when we got there, they were like rushing. They're like, "Oh, it's just the two of you that we're waiting for." I'm like, "Why?" And then when we asked them why, they were like, "Oh, because there's only actually 6 people who will fly today, and you're the last 2 people to board." We're like, what happened? So apparently, those 2 announcements that were made throughout the airport was just for me and my co-founder.
So we've cleared the airport, we are ready to get on board the flight. Now we're just feeling a bit nervous, right? Let's ask how it's like to be on an airplane.
Did you feel safe on this plane? I mean, did you feel any paranoia? I mean, how was the service?
They give you water, they make you feel secure.
I sprayed alcohol on like the table and I wiped it, and it was so yellow.
The flight attendants have full PPE suits, they wear face shields.
They're all in their bunny suits. So, and I felt safe.
They only were around to give the safety guidelines at the beginning of the flight. After that, they were in the galley and they did not step out. And we were told to not go and like visit them unless it's like absolutely necessary.
Every time you visit a toilet, afterwards the toilet is completely being cleaned, disinfected. They have obviously different meal service. So it's definitely very safe, I would say. Everyone keeps their distance. Passengers are being spaced out.
So I had like the entire row to myself, and that was great.
With Qatar, it was pretty much that I would have a row in front of me and a row behind me empty. And even if the seat would be close to other people, you could just move around.
I traveled with Jetstar. And I chose the first row so that, I have leg room, I'm not facing anybody.
The first row on a budget flight feels like that's the first class of a budget flight. I know that feeling.
As we've heard so far, flying on an airplane, going through an airport, there are different procedures in different countries. But the most common thing among every country in the world right now is quarantine. Let's hear from Rene, Kass, and Sudha about their experiences of quarantine in their countries.
When you arrived at your destination in Taipei, do you feel the protocols were sufficient?
I don't know if you know the news of this guy from the Philippines, unfortunately, again, who quarantined in Taiwan. Diba? He got out 8 seconds, got fined. So they were very strict. So we got picked up by the hotel van. And then when we arrived in the hotel, we were given like 5 minutes to stay inside the car until we can go out. So you gotta wait.
When I went for my first stay home notice, the bus wouldn't even tell you where you go. So you sit in the bus and you don't know where you go. And then it stops at a hotel and you'll be like, okay, so this is me now.
So you're gonna be like, okay, don't go out yet because they will track. So you sit down, and then one by one we had to go out.
We would now leave the bus one by one.
So when we entered, they sprayed us. They sprayed the baggage. We couldn't take the elevator or the lift, so we had to take the stairs up to our rooms.
Say your name, then you would just sign a paper and you would get your card. So last time around, the whole check-in process was really streamlined and it only took 5 minutes to go into the actual room.
How long will the quarantine? Is your quarantine? You're currently in quarantine.
This is day 3 of 15. So it's technically 14 days, but they only count the next. So you arrive today, they only count the first day on your next day.
How many days again were you in this quarantine?
14 days in the hotel.
And during these 14 days, it sounds like a very procedural question. During those 14 days, when would the testing be done?
Basically, I did my test 10 days into my stay-at-home notice. The facility was for checking was all in the hotel itself, so I didn't have to leave anywhere to do it. It was like on the 10th floor, so I just had to go down to that floor and just get it done along with other people staying at the hotel who had to do the test as well.
Is this your own expense?
It is my own expense. So because we're residents, but we don't have like an apartment here or anything. So Taiwan actually has about 81 quarantine hotels that are certified quarantine hotels. So it's on our own expense, but I know that if you're a resident, after the whole quarantine period is over, you can apply for a reimbursement of, I think, until half of the 1,500 NT a day.
And it was $2,000 for 14 days.
The cost is around $2,300, which is for the stay home notice for the hotel and for the test.
Meals are included, right, in this?
Meals are included, and it's again, I would say it's a streamlined kind of meal. They try to please everyone. It's like the bento box kind of style. Obviously, during quarantine, they don't serve you any silverware. There's no glasses and things like that.
All the quarantine hotels, their price will include 3 meals a day, unless you tell them not to give you, because you can actually order from Uber Eats or Food Panda. It's okay. The hotels will have protocols on how they can arrange for the food to be taken from the driver all the way to your room.
My birthday, I celebrated in my hotel room. Deepavali, I celebrated in my hotel room, and my friends and my family, they were very nice. They dropped off like sweets for Deepavali and like for my birthday, like cakes and stuff. Even my colleague dropped off like a piece of cake for my birthday. It was so sweet.
If I were there in Taipei, I would have bubble tea and minced pork rice delivered to my doorstep.
I've already done that in the last 2 days.
How are you being monitored? How are you being tracked? Is it just an app like Trace Together here in Singapore, or did you have to carry anything special?
So within the hotel, we are not allowed to even leave our rooms, not even open the windows. So it was very strict. We had a rule booklet and like a bunch of like info sheets that we had to read up the minute we got into the hotel to make sure that we understood the whole process of stay at home. And based on that, because you're not allowed to leave the hotel, that gives the hotel staff, I guess, the officers, as well as ICA and MOH, like a little bit of like they know we're not going to do anything stupid. So what we did, or what they did rather, is they checked in on me via phone call, video call, and also they came to my room every single day. Knocked on the door and made sure we showed our IC and made sure that we were the person that we said we were. And so those two things were done randomly throughout the day, and that was their way of monitoring.
Now that we've heard from Kass arriving in Taipei and Rene and Sudha arriving in Singapore to serve their quarantines, let's speak with Abby and ask her how it's like to arrive in the Philippines.
Apparently, when you arrive and you're an OFW, they will assign you a hotel for free. But so I told the lady in the counter. I said, "Oh, I already have my hotel, so that's
Is your
okay. I won't
hotel
take."
was your hotel on the approved list?
Yes. So you
Okay.
have to research that your hotel that you book is in
Mm,
the list. Yes.
okay.
So actually, they were quite shocked. They said, "Ma'am, are you an OFW?" I said, "Yes." But I already booked my hotel, and they said, "Are you sure, ma'am?" And I said, "Yes, I'm sure." Oh, and they already gave the name of the hotel. So I remembered the name of the hotel so I can research it later. After the hotel assignment, it's the swab test. So they were very orderly and systematic. And I have seen another friend's story on Instagram that she waited 3 hours for her swab test in Naiya, in Manila airport. So this is where I can't stop raving about the Clark Airport. I was like, what? 3 hours in Manila? My whole experience was in and out the airport in 30 minutes.
Once you're at the hotel, Abby, that's where you'll wait for the results, right?
Yes.
Of the test. And once you got the results, that was it. I mean, that's it. You're free to
That was
go.
it. I'm free to go. I don't need to wait 14 days. But of course, I still stayed home 14 days. I'm not like out and about.
The only way one would be able to leave quarantine is to get a negative result from a COVID-19 test. Now, we've seen these tests on television, in photos, in articles, but how is it like to get tested? Let's hear from my friends.
Can you describe the PCR test?
The PCR test itself is painful. I can't describe it. I cried after. It's really painful. The first thing that you're gonna do is you're gonna put the swab all the way down your throat, and you're gonna choke,
What?
and you're gonna be like, "What is happening?" And you
I
can't
thought it
move.
was I thought it was the thing up the nose. This is different.
There's two. So one is all the way down the throat until you choke. The second one is like all the way up your nose until you wanna sneeze or you feel like it's bleeding. It's that feeling. It's painful.
First, you would have to, of course, take down your mask, and they're gonna do a swab on the nose, up the nostrils, and then through the throat. So it's like a very long cotton buds goes down. And I thought it was gonna be painful, so I was just joking around. I was laughing. I'm like, is it gonna be painful? And they're probably so used to it. No, it's not. It's just gonna take a while, and then boom, it's so fast. It's done in less than 30 seconds.
You also have to check very carefully when you do a PCR test. Like you have to ask the hospital or the clinic how long until the test comes out because it expires. So if it expires and then you board the plane, like the time itself matters, what time it came out. So if you board the plane and it expires, you're done.
The one that I did during SHN, that was painful. It's not really painful. It's a weird feeling. It's not ticklish. It's not painful. It's just something being stuck up in your nose in an unknown place that you can't really decipher where, and it's just like twisting.
And then it's being turned around about 5 times, left in place for a couple of seconds in there.
Mine was up my nose in like some part of my this area that like it's just like a tube that goes up and like takes whatever it needs to take for testing.
Depending on where you do it and what type of test you do, they might also do a throat swab as well. So that's that. And I think the one important part here is just keep breathing normally through your mouth, but through your mouth only. If you keep breathing through your mouth, then you won't have such a huge effect in your nose, because it can be very ticklish. The first time I didn't know about, you start almost to cry. It's a little bit uncomfortable, especially when you start feeling it, go all the way in. But if you keep breathing through your mouth, it's actually bearable. And by now I have done 10 swab tests. So
10 swab tests. Oh my gosh, you're a pro. You're the person that I know who's probably done this the most.
Another perhaps intimidating part of the whole process of traveling overseas during this pandemic is getting the full grasp of the procedures needed to make that cross-border travel. Let's hear from Kass, Abby, Rene, and Sudha on the procedures that they had to undertake in order to make that cross-border travel.
What sort of clearances did you need to to make that travel journey from Manila to Taipei?
They need people now to have a medically certified RT-PCR test. 3 days prior to boarding, you have to travel for either business or you're a returning resident.
Just for clarification, this requirement was on the Taiwan side.
Yes. Well, it's on the Taiwan side that has to be vetted by the local airlines. So I think Manila to Taipei there's only 2 airlines catering that flight now. It's China Airlines and Philippine Airlines, and they're co-operating the whole thing anyways. So yes, that's the only requirement to travel to Taiwan.
How was it like to exit Singapore? And did you need clearance first from the Philippine government before returning to the Philippines or anything like that?
I realized it wasn't that difficult. I didn't need any sort of permits from our Philippine government. It was a normal departure. So in Singapore, from the time of departure, actually you can decide to go home tomorrow. There's not much requirements. You just need to book your hotel before you land. But it was quite easy. It was very fast. It was as if it was just traveling normally pre-COVID. So everything was the same.
You're in Chennai and you're ready to fly back to Singapore. What were the procedures that you had to follow on that end before coming home? What kind of clearances did you need?
The best part is that I'm Singaporean, so pretty much very little is needed from me except for a little form that I had to fill up. It's like a health declaration form of like where I was, if I had been quarantined in the place that I was at, that kind of stuff, where I'll be staying. It was just a little guideline on whether I'll be staying in the hotel, the facility that they were providing, that kind of stuff. So it's just that form. So I filled that up a couple of days before I left. And literally all I had to do was book a flight and leave my house. Everything else was okay for me as a Singaporean.
When you filed that health declaration form, did that involve getting a PCR test, those COVID-19 tests in India?
Nothing of that sort. So I was joking with some of my relatives who were concerned about my flight back. And I was just telling them that as long as I'm a Singaporean and me flying back, I'm actually, whether I have COVID or not, like whether I'm positive or negative, I'm actually liable, their liability, like Singapore's liability. So in that sense, they only checked my, whether I was positive or negative after I came to Singapore. There was no need for like me to do a test before and make sure that I was negative.
You're ready to fly back to Singapore from Germany. What was the process like for your return trip?
I have to apply via my employer to get approval for return. This process is now relatively simple compared to what it was like maybe 6 months ago, I would say. So your employer applies for you, and then MOM will reply with a form where you will fill out where you have been, which countries, and how often you have visited them, and then also do you have any symptoms. Once you get that approval or that form back, you will then have a 72-hour window where you can travel into Singapore. So at this stage, you don't need to provide travel details. You will just say like, this is a flight I would like to take. And then once you get approval, you can book your flight.
Does that include getting a negative PCR, a negative COVID-19 test from your country of origin?
It depends on the country of origin. So for Germany, it does not, because you will go into stay-home notice in Singapore, and you will go into a dedicated quarantine facility, which you will ultimately have a swab test after 10 days.
In the past 20 minutes, you've heard from Kass, Abby, Rene, and Sudha on their travel experiences. Now, let's ask them for their best travel tips during this pandemic.
What advice would you give someone who intends to travel during this pandemic?
Maybe a couple of things. The first one being research thoroughly. I've known of some people who attempted to travel and then like book their hotels and flights and then just had it go to waste.
So make a checklist of what are the requirements from the country that you are departing from, Singapore, and then the requirements of the country that you are arriving at and not just the country, but the specific airport, because in Manila it's different from Clark. So I had to go to the Clark guidelines. And then also cross-check it with the airline, because every airline also has different guidelines.
The second one is that also just be really careful about taking care of yourself, because I think at some point, even though we were trying to be careful, we forget.
Keep wet wipes at your disposal as well. What I did when I got into my seat is that I wiped off every surface, like the food board that comes down.
Bring your own alcohol. Check the limit. I think there's a higher limit if you're gonna bring your own alcohol spray. And then just spray everything that you get your hands on or your body on.
I went like full crazy, and I did like wipe off like everything that I could see, like even like the top part where you rest your head and everything.
I would think airlines would clean the tables and all and sanitize, but I just did my own test and I did it and I'm like, why is this yellow?
Have your COVID kit instead of a Kikai kit.
You always have hand sanitizer at your disposal.
Extra mask, your sanitizer, your wipes, and also your own pen. You have a lot of forms to fill. Better be sure that you have your power bank and your gadgets fully charged, because you're going to be referring to a lot of your emails or your soft copy, approvals. I show it sometimes, so they don't need to touch it, right? So they don't need to touch the paper. I'll just show it. This is the approval. This is my certificate of all that.
Some flights, or I think most flights, they do give like a face shield that they require passengers to wear during takeoff and landing, and some of them encourage to wear the thing throughout the flight as well.
I would try to get a flight that has less layovers, because then obviously we have less exposure. If you have to have a layover, try to choose a destination where obviously the country is in a more safe state, right? Also, choose a 5-star airline, as I said before. And then when you are in the plane, don't be afraid of saying, I don't want to sit here. I have done this before where I said like, hey, there's a person in front of me and a person behind me, and that's not in my comfort zone. So I told the staff that I would say like, hey, can I just move here? And they are very happy to help you and accommodate you. They all know this is a difficult situation for everyone, so they're more than happy to move you around. The one last thing I would say is, if you need to travel. It's definitely safe. I wouldn't shy away from it. For me personally, it was necessary to travel. I don't do things that I don't have to do, but in this case I had to travel, and I just made my own due diligence. So I looked up, how should I fly, where should I fly, travel doing an off-peak time. Don't travel on the weekend if you don't have to, for example, is a good advice, right? But besides that, I think everything is safe if you are safe yourself.
Making that cross-border travel isn't as complicated as I first thought. It just takes meticulous amounts of preparation and planning. I'd like to thank Rene, Abby, Kass, and Sudha for sharing their experiences with me so I can share them with all of you on how it's like to travel during this pandemic. Of course, their experiences were their experiences, and a lot of these protocols and procedures are changing daily on a weekly basis. So it's best to check with your airline or your airport or your government on how it's like to travel during this pandemic. If you enjoyed this video, do subscribe to my channel, and I hope to be producing more and more of these videos in 2021. Maraming salamat and take care.